of the drive-in. Not the drive-in theater, but the drive-in restaurant. How many of you remember that? Huh? How many of you want to admit you're old enough to remember that? I lived in a small town, Ritzville, Washington, and man, you were really uptown if you had one of those, and you could drive in and they'd come out on their roller skates, right? And they'd put a tray on your window at A&W, and that was a big, big deal. And I want to tell you, what I want to submit to you is we take that for granted, but the drive-in restaurant changed the world. It changed the world because it went from a drive-in where you parked and they came out to you. Remember, they had those little boxes. You push a button and go, and you'd say, whatever, that's fine. They changed from coming out to do that to the next step, which was literally ordering your food, picking it up, and never even having to stop. Ray Kroc made a fortune planting McDonald's that did that. You see, fast food revolutionized, it evolutionized our society and our world. I bet you never thought about that. Because if you think on this objectively and you raise it up from the micro to the macro vision of society and how we live, this modification of the food industry, this business innovation, made people more and more to expect things quickly, easily, conveniently, and accessibly. In other words, it was one of the first steps to creating a society and world that evolved around us. I don't have to do and I don't want to do any more than I need to do. It can come to me. Which is nice. I got to admit, last night, busy day. My wife had a busy day. Went to Outback, and the young woman came out after we had called in, right? Brought the food, and there it is. I'm done. Don't have to get out in the rain at all. It's nice. But I think it's also contributed to a demanding attitude that has compounded our self-centeredness. Things must come to us. Every retailer who works online knows that you have 4 seconds, our attention span is 4 seconds before you go to the next website if it doesn't catch your attention. And Walmart is working to get it down to 3 if they can. It's just amazing. We have this short attention span. The ease of Amazon shopping has all but destroyed, in many ways, in-store shopping. We once had, what are they called? Strip malls, right? We had strip malls, and then as suburban and urban sprawl took place, we got big shopping malls, which really took the place of small town communities, right? You could go there, you could mingle, you could eat. They put up Christmas decorations, all the things that changed, and now we're back to the strip malls, which are really quick. You go in, and if you're too busy for that, you just sit at home and you order it online, and then it comes to your door. Even church. We broadcast our worship service online for 11 years now, which is great because I hear comments of people recuperating, people who are sick or traveling who are able to stay in touch and worship with us. But I also have people tell me, I've got to confess that I really like going to church at home in my pajamas with my cup of coffee and a toilet nearby. Now, I'm not saying that any of this is wrong. I'm not. It just is. It just has changed. But when we take it all and we really think about it objectively, what we have woven together in so many parts of our lives is a perspective that is demanding, impatient, self-indulgent, and increasingly lazy. Why go anywhere when I can stay at home, buy anything, order anything, have them deliver my dinner to me from the atmospherically pleasant environment of my lazy boy chair? Personally, it's nice, but I would say it is passively destructive. It is passively destructive as it kind of eats away at the fiber of community. Just this past week, there was a survey that came out, and I don't want to pick on them, but this is the survey. It was 30% of millennials, and remember, there's 70% that this isn't it, but 30% of millennials quit their job because the job requires them to work at a specific place during specific hours. You know, that's a lot to ask. Okay, so this is what came to mind as I read our scripture today. We have this profound story of Jesus healing this woman. She's a Gentile. She lives in a Gentile country. She has a sick child. And we hear that, and that's usually where we stop. We focus on the miracle. We focus on the woman's determination and her faith, all of which are legitimate illustrations and points within this text. But this week, I was drawn to something else. This week, the in-between is what caught my attention. Because I thought not about the event or the act, but the location of the event and the act. Why? Because the cities of Sidon and Tyre are a long way from the home of Jesus in Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee. It's a long way. 50 to 60 miles as the crow flies. And it's even longer if you don't want to climb through the rocky terrain and over the hills in the Middle Eastern heat. It's 3 or 4 day journey. And to go there would also mean that you would become, as a good Jew, you become unclean. You're going into Gentile territory. You're touching them. Why in the world would you want to go there? You not only have to be in good shape to make that trek, you have to be pretty committed to doing it. You know, you just don't wake up and say, "Oh, honey, let's get out our sandals and take a walk to Sidon," you know? You don't do that. It's not whimsical. And the fact that Mark includes it in his gospel, and Mark doesn't waste his time or energy or pen on unnecessary details, makes it even more important. You see, Jesus is going and doing things in a place that is really way outside of his job description. And we get a hint of that when the woman comes to him and he says to her, "Lady, you're not of the children of Israel." And she catches him and says, "But even the dogs get the crumbs, Master." You see, if you've been around church much, you know the disdain that the Jewish religion had for the Samaritans, because Samaritans were of unpure bloodlines. They were a mixed race. Well, it was 3 times as bad regarding the people of Tyre and Sidon. They were at the bottom of the pecking order. So all of this kind of came together in my mind, and I said, what in the world is Jesus doing there? Some conclude that he went to get away from the crowds, that he just needed a respite, he just needed a time away. Well, that's possible. Others said that he was so popular and he had riled up folks so much that he needed to get out of town and out of the jurisdiction of Herod Agrippa. And still others surmise that maybe he went there because there were so many people who had come from Tyre and Sidon to Galilee to hear him speak. And there are instances, many instances, that would support that. In fact, you could make a good case for any or all of these. But I would say to you, I think all of those are nice and important and perhaps very significant, but I think the point might be just very, very simple. Jesus just went there. He went there not because it was convenient or easy or on his way somewhere he goes every day, because it isn't. In fact, even if you go to Sidon and then Terre, it would be like going to Chicago from New York through Boston. Doesn't make any sense. Unless you work for American Airlines, then it might make sense. He went there not because it was easy, convenient, but because people, not borders or boundaries or cultural distinctions, are what were important to him. The needs of people is what he sought to fill. The cries they had for help were what he labored to answer. It is, take my word for it, it is no small thing to walk 60 miles in the desert from Capernaum to Sidon on the Mediterranean. That's a lot of work. The temperature, the rocks, the stones, even today, it is a difficult trip. But Jesus does it, setting aside any kind of obstacle, whether it's geographical or physical or religious or political, any obstacle that might say, you don't have to do that. None of that could stop him. He makes the trip. In fact, isn't it interesting that Jesus doesn't wait for them to come to him? Jesus goes to the people, the Syrophoenicians, on their home turf. He's playing a away game. He's going to their home turf. And in so doing, he discovers not just someone of incredible need, but he encounters someone of a deep, deep faith. It is an encounter so important that our gospel author, Mark, felt compelled to include it for generations to come. Alexander Gerst was a German astronaut, and the first time he went on a rocket into outer space and had the opportunity to look from outer space back at the Earth, he made this comment. He said, in outer space, you do not see any borders. You just see a planet with a thin, fragile atmosphere suspended in a vast and hostile darkness. He says, in outer space, it's clear that on Earth we are one humanity. And we all share eventually the same fate. In his best-selling book, New York Times, his text called Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari, he concludes, and stay with me and think about this. He concludes, as he talks about the growth of and evolution of people and nations and so forth, he concludes that nations and borders and most of the things that we label ourselves, he says, they're all myths. Let me define that, what he means by that. A nation only is a nation because we believe it. Right? A people are only a people if you believe it. Otherwise, he says it's just a myth. Why? Because nations collapse, new borders are made, new definitions, all kinds of things change. They are only what they are because we make them that way. So if you take them away, back in the day, there's a lot of controversy about building the wall with Mexico, right? I remember somebody on Facebook putting up a map of the United States, and it said, the wall that Mexico will pay for. And it was prior to the Mexican-American War, and they would own California and New Mexico and Texas and You know, the point being, borders are what we make, and they're only borders because we say they are. Borders of race and gender and all these kinds of things. Someday they'll be redrawn or they'll disappear completely. So the question I think this text raises is, why do we allow them to separate and even destroy us? Paul, in quoting the psalmist, says, the earth is the Lord's, after all, and everything in it. So why do we choose to live otherwise by distinctions of our own making? Why? Because it's easier. Because it's easier than saying, you know what, I'm willing to invest the time and the work and the energy to make things different. It's easier to stay in my home on the Sea of Galilee than it is to pack up and go on that hot and heated trek to Sidon and Tyre. That's a long, long way. You know, the world can just come to me. Right? How great this world would be if everybody was like me. Not really, but, you know, we think that way, don't we? If it was like us. Yet as our world grows smaller and people live closer, you know, how's that working? You see, the road to peace and to harmony, understanding, and cooperation is the big picture. It's the long journey. It's never easy. It's never quick. It requires commitment and it requires persistence. The kind this woman, as well as Jesus, displayed. Requiring the high road, not the easy one, the long view, not the quick fix. This is the way of Jesus. Jesus came, there's a joke in the ministry, Jesus came to found the kingdom of God, and what he got was the church. There's some truth in that, right? The long picture, we still labor for that kingdom because Jesus calls us on that journey. Not because it's easy, but because it's worthwhile. Not because we can predict when and where and how we get there, but because we believe that if we do it in faith with God, nothing can stop us. And the story reveals that in a willingness to get up and get in and go out of our way, to dare to try what others say is unnecessary. In so doing, we just might experience the unexpected. We just might even experience a miracle.